welcome to another episode of Pause for Payments. I am Kristy Duncan, and I have with me today an awesome blockchain innovator, Christine Moy, who does an amazing job at demystifying blockchain, especially in the context of payments. Christine is with JP Morgan, based in New York. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. Christine, can we just talk a little bit about what you do with blockchain? You said you've been in it for 5 years. Seems like day one of blockchain in the world. Tell us a little bit about your role and what you do.
Sure. And my role has evolved in the past few weeks, actually. But to start off, first, I run the blockchain program, looking after all of the blockchain activities across the firm, essentially helping business leaders at JP Morgan understand what is this new technology that underpins cryptocurrencies. How might it impact my business? Could it be disruptive, or could it potentially open up new business opportunities? And our team is quite unique in that we're very technical, not only working on the strategy side, but to the extent that we have hypotheses coming out of the strategy that we define with the businesses, we actually go ahead and build blockchain-based applications and networks. And if there's a commercial case to actually take it forward, our team actually brings it from idea to production grade software, helping the businesses navigate all of the things that you need to navigate at the bank, like legal, compliance, regulatory, risk, cyber, et cetera. And so, that's the blockchain portion. Separately, in the past few weeks, I've also taken on additional responsibility looking after the Link network. Those of you who may be familiar with the Interbank Information Network, it's now been rebranded as Link. And essentially what it is a peer-to-peer network for cross-border payments banks to connect in a peer-to-peer way to exchange information to solve cross-border payments problems. And so one of our first applications was, it's called Resolve, basically the ability for banks to resolve sanctions exceptions in the cross-border payments process by directly exchanging information like date of birth, address, et cetera, to validate any payment beneficiaries that may have come up on a sanctions list, as an example. But what we're really excited to debut, actually breaking news in the past month, is that we're tech live with a new application named Confirm, which allows the ability to pre-validate a payment, a global payment, before making the payment. And this is actually like something that we got from our Link participants in the past year. This is based off of feedback that we got from our Link participants in the past year that, they were like, oh, Resolve, this is great. Love resolving sanctions exceptions. But what I really want to do is have the ability to validate the account owner or the account status or the account activity or the account FX before I actually even pay that account. And I want to do it globally. I want it for cross-border payments. And so in the past year, we've been heads down working on this, and really proud to have gotten onto the other side. Now can basically say that we're live with that application, and are in the process of reaching out to all of you banks to essentially figure out if you'd want to be a data responder. So basically use the application, and then also have a unique aspect where you can actually be a data responder, data requester or data responder. And so data requester is like, I want to make a payment to this account. Is it Christine Moy's? Yes or no. Data responder can say like, yes, this is actually my account. And yes, it is Christine Moy. And what's really interesting about how we've structured this, because we're a bank and we're building this for other banks, is that essentially when you respond saying like, yes, this is Christine Moy's account, you have the opportunity to essentially capture the revenue from the fees that the requester is sending. So that's like a unique model that that is uniquely enabled by blockchain and Link specifically, that differs from anything else that might be in the market.
Well, that's fantastic. I sometimes wish we could have that confirm option even within our own domestic payment systems, because not all countries have that at the moment either. Right. So that's fantastic, Christine. Really, really exciting stuff that you're doing. There's, I'm certain, many other applications that you're building out and looking to apply blockchain to. Is certainly what you've done so far is very innovative. Can you tell us a little bit more of how you see blockchain changing payments and banking as we know it today?
Yeah, yeah, sure. You know, us blockchain nerds like to think of like the internet that we know of as the internet of information. Basically, this like at the time that it was new, this new infrastructure that enabled seamless and global transfer of information, almost like a democratization of information transfer and information creation when you talk about like blogging and social media, et cetera, and information distribution. And so, from the perspective of a blockchain nerd, we think of this as think of blockchain technology and some of the progress and innovation that we're seeing in this particular space, even including cryptocurrencies, as the next internet, like the internet of value, almost like an internet 2.0, internet of value. And specifically, what that, kind of when we think about that mental model, like basically the idea that essentially you'd be able to make a payment as easily as you would send an email, right? Like there was a time where we didn't have email and I don't know how we were communicating, but but at the time, so
Last century.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like impossible to even like kind of think back to when we didn't have the internet almost. I mean, I do remember like dial up, like all of that, but you know, so I think the general view is what like this is the internet of value, being able to send payments as easily as sending an email, democratizing access to payments, financial instruments, et cetera. And you're definitely seeing this in the public blockchain space with some of like the token issuances that have been happening since 2016, 2017 as an example. But it's difficult for me to say like what's next, because we can only really see what's in front of us right now. And I think kind of channeling internet 1.0, there's a great video out there on the internet of Mark Andreessen, who was one of the creators of the Netscape and Mosaic browser. And so basically at the foot of the internet. And I think that like in this one video clip, like someone asked him like, okay, so what are the best use cases for this browser and the internet that you talk about that's going to be so amazing? And he's kind of like, like I don't know, like like he like I mean at the time it was like, oh, I don't know, let's put a newspaper on the internet. But obviously since then, decades later, we know that we can't live without the internet. We can't live with the conveniences that have been enabled by the internet, and new technologies have spun up as a result of this. And so, that my short answer is I don't know, but what we are doing is working on the fundamental pieces to enable that future. And like we'll talk a little bit about, happy to talk a little bit more about it. But the fundamental pieces of information transfer through the link network, as an example, the fundamental pieces of value transfer through JP Morgan Coin, and also we have a program of work around digitizing financial instruments like the tokenization of bonds or repo trades, as an example. And so to net it, I think the most important and interesting thing here, especially as it relates to payments, is that blockchain, smart contracts, et cetera, enable seamless 24/7, 365 value transfer, like no batch updates and things that can be global. And more significantly and uniquely, that this value transfer can be programmable. That essentially you can write if-then statements, like if this happens, then send payment. That may seem like very basic, but when you kind of combine that with, let's say, like tokenized securities, like you can essentially get to something like very complex and very immediate that would typically otherwise have a lot of operational overhead and lift. For example, like I mentioned, a repo trade. Like in a repo trade, which for those of you who are not familiar, it kind of looks like a secured loan. It's like, I'm lending you like $100 of cash, and you're posting with me $100 worth of securities collateral. In reality, those are two different systems. Like for me to send you cash, that's a totally independent, separate system from you to send me securities. And so, to date, you're only able to essentially like, do overnight repo trades or term trades or, multiple days of trades. But like what you can uniquely enable with blockchain is using it as a subledger is that you can orchestrate two different ledgers at the same time. Like you can basically say, I'm not going to send you the cash until you send me the collateral, and then vice versa. And then you can even like compress the time that it would take to actually do those transfers and actually say like, I don't have to wait overnight. I can just do this now. So that's like an example of what we might see in the future.
Lots of
Or
innovation, fantastic innovation, just totally rethinking. Let's pull this all apart and put it back together in a way that makes more sense given the new technology capabilities.
yeah, and I think sorry to interrupt, just to add a little bit more on that. I think what I've learned in this journey is that we're really going to see like net new products and services. There just isn't a business case to say, like, we're doing this over here on regular technology, let's just lift and drop and do the same thing on blockchain. Like that just doesn't happen. And those of you that are in the audience that, are dealing with like our existing banking systems, as an example, that like, it's not going to be like, oh, okay, like I'm going to move from this system that I've been building for the past decade and then all of a sudden just move all my flow into like a thing that I've been building for the past 6 months. Like, that there's going to be some transition time where it's like, there's going to be like a 5-year plan. And then at that point, you're going to be like supporting 2 systems, and then you're paying double the cost. And then you're like, why am I doing this? And so my hunch based on this experience is that, really where you'll see blockchain or other emerging technologies thrive is in green spaces, in areas where there isn't existing infrastructure, or specifically use cases that uniquely cannot happen without blockchain today. What those are, I don't know, still working on it, looking for them. But that I know for sure it's not going to be like, oh, we're just using blockchain to replace flat payments. Like that's not going to happen. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, and going back to your internet analogy, I love that one because 20, 30 years ago, they could not have envisioned Facebook or online banking or mobile payments or, a lot of those things that we take for granted today. It's, Zoom calls.
Right. I mean, this is the stuff of, space movies doing the video calls.
Is.
Now it's just every day at every hour.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to talk a little bit about trust. And we know that trust is the absolute cornerstone of banking, and banks would not exist without trust. And I always talk about Canada, how Canadians love to bash the banks, but they always trust the banks with their money. How can blockchain, Christine, enhance the concept of trust for the customer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's actually just baked into the underlying fundamentals of the technology. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, there are so many ways to describe blockchain, and I'm sure everyone here has heard like 100 different ways, like in the past like 5 years, and are totally over it. But, I like to think of it as essentially a shared ledger or a shared audit trail between participants. So in the case of a network of banks, like essentially like a shared ledger of activities between banks. And so, it's like baked into the technology that you'll actually be able to have within the blockchain data structure, an audit trail of like who's done what, when, where, et cetera. I mean, obviously there are data privacy concerns, and, the devil is in the details of the implementation. But the unique value proposition that blockchain provides is that essentially every action is accountable and is essentially imprinted onto an immutable ledger that entities are sharing. Additionally, what you have is like the idea of being able to authenticate identity, and we don't have to get into the details of like public and private key pairs, but essentially like you can essentially like attribute every action or every transaction or every interaction on the blockchain with a particular entity by and identified by their public and private key pair. And so you can not only have the audit trail, but you can know the source of the transactions on the audit trail, if that makes sense. So it's just kind of baked into the technology and what makes it unique. And that's the reason why, for example, people think of blockchain as being uniquely positioned to enable what would they call, like, scarce digital assets. And so the analogy I like to use is that, okay, so like if we have a digital image, like I can send you, like, let's say we take a picture together and like I'll email you that image. Now we have two images of the same image, right? And then you'll email it to, I don't know, your mom. And then now there's like three images. With blockchain, by the way that the data is structured, essentially I can send you that image, but then there's no other image. And then you can send that image to your mom, and then, but there's only one image, like one digital item that we are interacting on. And like we can do a whole other session to explain like how that works. But the point is that you're able to create like scarce digital assets. And this is why people think it might be good for money in general. And the CBDCs is like central bank digital currencies is a whole other topic. But essentially it's that data structure that enables that digital scarce object that you're able to share and interact on. And then, specifically as it relates to JP Morgan's implementation of blockchain, we actually are one of the few banks to have almost created our own blockchain protocol, like the underlying technology layer. Essentially what we did was take the public Ethereum blockchain code base, and we forked it, which meant we copied and pasted it. It was open source. And then we added enterprise technology trappings, but then we also added a private node to enable private transactions between participants in a network. And then for the first time in the history of JP Morgan, we spent a lot of resources on something, and then we gave it away for free. We actually open sourced it back. And so, and actually what was really cool was that there were actually a number of companies that ended up picking up Quorum, now called Consensus Quorum, picking up Quorum and using it and building projects on it as part of their blockchain innovation and discovery. And then when they started getting serious about taking their projects to reality, they would call and say like, hey, I've been using Quorum, like I'm about to like sink millions of dollars in this, and we're going to make it real. Like, are you going to be there to support this? And it was only then that we realized that people were actually using Quorum, and we were like, oh, well, someone needs to support this for real. And so actually in the past few months, we've announced that Quorum has been acquired by Consensus, which is a company that is focused in the blockchain space and especially the Ethereum ecosystem to shepherd for further enterprise use. So in terms of trust, like you have the audit trail, the authenticated identity, and then in some implementations, privacy.
So fantastic. It's a whole green field for me, but I love it. And it's so innovative. And you're right. You're just at the very dawn of this new era. It's fascinating. You talked a little bit about cryptocurrencies, and I've been following central bank digital currencies and intrigued by them. And Bitcoin is another whole story that I don't want to get into today. But JP Morgan has this JP Morgan coin. And I'm really interested to hear more about that. And why would JP Morgan want their own coin, and how that works in the market?
Yeah, sure. And so the origin story to JP Morgan coin is that a couple of years ago, I would say like 2 or 3 years now, as part of our blockchain journey, we were working on trying to understand how we could leverage blockchain for the financial markets. And so we were actually working with our debt capital markets team to essentially structure a blockchain-based bond end-to-end. We could talk about the pain points. Apparently, it's like 100 some different steps and like 66 different systems to originate a bond. Who knew? But essentially, like what we wanted to do was kind of take a view. It was pretty radical at the time, but take a view and say, we're going to wipe the slate clean, pretend it's not all there. It's not at all there. And, create what would the perfect blockchain-based bond look like? And so we actually created this tokenized bond where, you'd be able to syndicate it to investors. Use the smart contracts, automated the interest payments of, interest payments of the bond over time. But then we got stuck at some point where we were like, wait a minute, if we want to settle the sale of the bond and we want to automatically pay interest on the bond using smart contracts, like you can just create a bond because I don't know, that's just like legal documents and we do them all the time, but you can't create money. Like what do we do? Like, and we're not going to use crypto, for other reasons we can talk about another time, but so how would we do this? Would we just instruct like a wire payment but then we'd have to say like, okay, we received the wire and then send the acknowledgement back to the blockchain and then we'll confirm. Then it's like, don't use the blockchain at all. Like that seems super hokey. And so it was at that point we were like, okay, so we're not going to create money, but we want to get, money like fiat, like represented on the blockchain so we can take advantage of all the automated like settlement via smart contracts, et cetera. And so that was actually the origin story for JP Morgan Coin, in that we were like, okay, we want to tokenize cash in the same way that we want to tokenize debt, but we essentially have to do it in such a way where, money's sitting in the account, and then we're creating a representation of that in tokenized form on the blockchain, and then it can just like live its blockchain dreams and do all the things that smart contracts enable it to do. And so, we basically like did that for our own project. But then what we realized was that everyone else had run into the same thing, right? Like everyone had said, oh, well, I need to settle, but not everyone is one of the top US dollar clearing banks in the world. And so that was where we were like, whoa, maybe this is something in itself. And so, it essentially broke out into its own program to be an offering standalone that can be leveraged for others who are on their blockchain journey and need payments or need like a payments leg for, whether it be trade finance or a markets use case or even a cross-border use case, et cetera. And basically that's the origin story of JP Morgan Coin. But the cool thing is that we announced that we were testing with clients like I think about a year ago. And then we went radio silent for a whole year, maybe a year and a half. And basically people thought the project was dead. People thought we were like gone. Like they were like, how's the blockchain program? What's going on? We were just heads down trying to figure out like, how are we going to do this without like, destroying any legal or regulatory like frameworks, and like just kind of navigating all the things that a bank has to navigate in terms of getting all of the internal approvals and getting all of the external approvals. And I think what's interesting is that when you're, from doing technology from a bank perspective, it's not about the technology. The technology was done a long time ago. Like, it's just like everything else, like making sure that, we have like the legal interpretations correct. And so, really proud to share that we have just announced that JP Morgan Coin is now live. And the reason why it took so long was because what we were really fighting for were two things. One, ensuring that having a balance in JP Morgan Coin is the same as having a deposit at JP Morgan Chase Bank NA, like having the same legal status. That's super important. That was super important to us, and certainly not anything that you're going to find in the broader stablecoin, retail stablecoin market, or even some of the enterprise depository coin markets. Like basically having a balance in JP Morgan Coin, the same as having deposits at JP Morgan Chase Bank NA. The second thing that we fought for was that having the blockchain as system of record. For those of you that have been on your blockchain journey, like you would know that at some juncture, like someone's going to tell you to drop copy, like whatever's on the blockchain into your actual system of record. And then you're like, wait, so I'm just using the blockchain as a messaging system? Why would I do all that? So like, basically we fought to make sure that the ledger that's on the blockchain is actually the recognized ledger for these balances. So super proud. On to the next thing, but basically survived that juncture.
Fantastic. Just as a side point, I've always understood a stable coin as being like a basket of fiat currencies that are represented as a cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. Can you share what the basket of fiat currencies are on the JP Morgan coin?
Well, I mean, for us, it's actually on a single currency basis. So we've started with US dollars. And so, like I said, like if you have $100 of $100 US dollars balance of JP Morgan coin, that's just you having $100 at deposit, 100 US dollars at deposit at JP Morgan.
Okay.
Will be expanding to other currencies based on client and use case demand. So like there will be a point in time where you will also have like $100 euro balance in JP Morgan coin, and that will just be the same as having $100 euros in your JP Morgan bank account, essentially. So, for us, had to keep it simple, had to keep it straight and narrow, which is existing currencies. So not creating a new currency, existing currencies just represented on the blockchain so they can do all the blockchain things, all the blockchain gymnastics, but not creating a new currency and not creating any baskets of currency at this point. And, whilst, whilst it seems like a narrow approach to start, like it's basically one that was very well considered in terms of us being able to navigate the regulatory landscape. And for us to try to not boil the ocean and to actually get to the other side, and say that we can do this, with the full blessing of our regulators, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I give you a lot of credit because starting simple, even though it sounds simple, we're just going to have it based on the US dollar, but clearly there's been a lot of behind the scenes work to actually make that happen. So congratulations. That's a big project and a lot of advancement, and is preparing you and the market for bigger and better, more exciting things to come.
That's what we hope.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. I want to talk a little bit about central bank digital currencies, one of my pet topics. And it's, again, another emerging concept that's being considered by many of the world's central banks. And I think Libra last year, announced by Facebook, is kind of pushing that up the agenda for the central banks, not wanting to lose control of their fiat currencies. But there's also, I think, a little bit of a component of financial inclusion here, that cryptocurrency or central bank digital currency in particular may be able to help us build out and support the agenda for financial inclusion. Can you shed some light on that for us, Christine?
Sure. I guess the way that I think about it is kind of just looking upon like the evolution of technology over time, and value transfer. Like we've seen non-crypto and non-blockchain examples of how there is a space for payments and value transfer amongst like a certain part of the world that would be mobile first or technology first, not necessarily bank first. So let's take, for example, like M-Pesa in Africa as an example. So, that clearly arose out of a need for the participants in that local community to be able to transact in real time, transact digitally, transact through their phone, not necessarily having access to banking infrastructure, banking accounts, et cetera. And so, there is already like a precedent of, okay, there's a space for this. Like people would use mobile first digital payments if they had access to it. And it may or may not be outside of the existing banking system. In fact, in most cases, or in those cases that have been precedent, it's away from the banking system. What's really exciting about central bank digital currencies, but like for those are, private venture based, like value transfers, as in like M-Pesa, like from Safaricom, telecom company, like basically, like an ecosystem of value transfer that is not sovereign based, but rather like private commercial company based. And so what's interesting about central bank digital currencies is that, here, what you're doing is kind of saying like, you've got the central bank, the regulatory center, embracing this mobile first or technology first approach, right? And essentially, like, I don't know, just to like demystify central bank digital currencies, in most representations, you can think of it as just M0 money, which would be cash or coins that were like paper bills and coins that we would know of. And in most implementations, like just being converted into digital balances in some particular implementation. And so, like the idea here is essentially like you're combining the best of both worlds. Like you're combining like your sovereign like currency without actually creating a new currency or a privately distributed one or a commercial one. But you have the real-time technological benefits of like technology today. So I think that's why people are excited about central bank digital currencies. I mean, the devil's really, again, in the details on the implementation. And certainly there have been like a number of projects and both commercial and sovereign in the space of how this new technology can promote financial inclusion, but it's definitely an important topic that we're going to see more evolution on.
Yeah, and I really look forward to that because financial inclusion is a big agenda for some countries, not all. Uh, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the central banks start addressing the whole concept of cryptocurrency one way or another. I know Christine Lagarde's been very vociferous about this as well.
I think to add on to the financial inclusion part, I think what's interesting also is not only just like the flat value transfer, but also access to credit is kind of another aspect when you're talking about financial inclusion. And really interesting work out of Kiva, which is a microfinance organization. And in as part of their general work, and they're also kind of on a blockchain journey as well. As part of their work, what they identified was that one of the main barriers to financial inclusion is, not having access to the banking system, but like kind of double clicking on that is actually not having like an authenticated way to like identify yourself. Maybe not having the right like government paperwork as an example, et cetera. And so, some of the work that they've done that is blockchain based is mostly focused on digital identity. Like how can we leverage like how can we leverage the blockchain to culminate almost like a digital passport of who am I, like based on attestations that, I may get from an employer or I may get from someone that I'm, borrowing money from and then paying back, like basically a set of attestations that, I can carry with me around the world, that, basically I can end up in a new country and say, okay, I am a refugee, but I do have like a history in life. And, in my old country, like, I paid back these loans on time or these micro loans on time, or I did have a job or I do have a college degree that I can carry these attestations with me. And one thing to note for blockchain enthusiasts out there, like when we're talking about digital identity on the blockchain, we're never putting identity attributes on the blockchain itself. Like basically the blockchain, the global blockchain is just like a registry of, is attestation ABC actually still live or has it been revoked? Like has it, expired or has it been revoked for one reason or another? So you're never actually going to see data on the blockchain. Like please don't put any personal data on the blockchain. But that's how it's used for. But that's another emerging topic in the space relevant to enabling financial inclusion in the context of blockchain and cryptocurrencies.
A little learning is a dangerous thing. Thank you for opening my eyes to this, and we're going to hear more in our Australian event next week. This is all really interesting, Christine. I want to switch gears to close out our discussion today and talk about your amazing career at JP Morgan. It sounds so exciting, especially with your blockchain journey. And you've worked there for many years, but in the blockchain space in particular for the last 5 years or so, even though you don't have a technical background. Can you share some of your pearls of career wisdom, as I call them, with our Women in Payments audience around the world?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, just to recap my career at JP Morgan very briefly, I'll try to be brief. I've been at JP Morgan for about 17 years now. Actually started in operations for syndicated loans, then moved into the investment banking division, covering the auto sector, survived the financial crises, and then actually moved to the commodities trading floor, covering the gold sector. And then separately after that, moved into credit risk and wealth management to build technology. So basically, and then after that moved into blockchain. And so like a really like random path of jobs. And the cool thing about JP Morgan is that you can have like literally like 5 or 6 totally different jobs in one place. So having had that experience of trying totally different things, at the firm, I would say that, my biggest advice to anyone, and especially women, is don't ever count yourself out. Because there's always like an overarching kind of feeling and thought of like, oh, I've never done this before. Maybe I'm not qualified. Or like, you read the job spec and like you don't check off like, 8 out of like the 10 bullets. Maybe you only check out like 2 or 3. And it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't apply for this. It's probably not me. And like I specifically remember even reading the job description for the blockchain role, and this was before people knew about blockchain. And it was totally bizarre. It said something like, if you care about like the future of finance and want to explore like the underlying technology of Bitcoin, send me your Twitter handle or something like that. And like this was like 6 years ago, and like no one at the bank had a Twitter handle. Like this was before Twitter went public. So like literally it was like, oh, that they're definitely not looking for me. Like, cause like I don't have a Twitter handle. I don't know what Bitcoin is. Like I care about the future of finance. Like that's about it. And I remember applying for that job and like telling my husband, like, I think that's going to be a long shot, but I'm super excited about it. But ultimately what I ended up finding out when I actually got the job was that I was perfect. They like thought I was perfect. Like, they were just like, we're looking for someone who's had like a variety of experiences in both operations and in product, and like knows like, about clients and the financial system, et cetera. Like, you're perfect. And I was like, I'm perfect. Oh, cool. And so, my top advice is don't ever count yourself out. Like you can let other people count you out, but don't count yourself out at the first juncture. And then the second, like gem is that, sometimes when you're in your career journey, it just may not make sense. Like, like as I mentioned, like I had like 5 different steps in my career. And, I always moved like roles because I followed what I was interested in learning about. Like basically if it was a blank space, I was going to run towards it. Like, so like, I don't know about that. I'm going to run towards it. And then, so I was following what I wanted to learn, and I was following like, sort of what I thought I could, what impact I could bring to bear. But certainly like, midway through my career, it kind of bummed me out because I had some colleagues that, had started in one role, went straight up, got promoted faster, like, ascended. And I kind of like at some point in myself, like kind of thought, maybe I just didn't make the right moves. Like maybe I should have just stayed where I was. Like, maybe I would have like, it's like, I mean, my timing was terrible. It's like literally every time I was up for a promotion cycle, I would just change jobs and start again. So like, I love challenges. And so, there was a point in time where I was like, man, what am I doing? But like, obviously in retrospect, and at the time everyone would say, oh, have you seen that Steve Jobs like commencement speech where like he says like when in retrospect everything all makes sense in the end? And I was like, no, I haven't. I'm not interested in watching it. But now that I am completely happy and satisfied where I am, and I feel like I'm able to make a significant impact where I am, and I know when I look back that every random turn that I took positioned me to be where I am today, and for me to be effective in the way that I need to be effective. So that's the other thing. I think if you're early in your career and you're like, what am I doing? Like, but for some reason you're just getting drawn to like areas and you're following your passion, but still it doesn't make sense. Have faith that for the most part, or in some cases, or at least in the case of my case and Steve Jobs, like it will work out, and it will make sense, like in the end, like why you made these random turns.
I love that. It's that whole concept of lifelong learning, but don't count yourself out. That is so, so true. And so many women do that. I know I did when I was working for a bank, and they were stupid because there would be that role they posted and there were 10 qualifications and I could only tick 7 or 8 of the boxes. I thought, well, I guess I better wait a couple of years till it comes around again.
Yeah. Like
And
people think that, yeah. Or they think maybe I should do another job so I can get those like other 3 bullets and then get the job that I actually want. No, just go straight.
yeah,
Try.
exactly. I love it. Those are really great insights, Christine. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, this has been a fabulous discussion, and I have learned a whole heck of a lot about crypto and about JP Morgan coin and about the interesting things that you're doing in the market and creating new value out of new technology and new approaches, new ways of looking at things. And I love the the way that JP Morgan's taking that lead. I love the whole cross-border payments things with the confirm and the resolve. That's fantastic. And it's going to make a big difference on the global stage in terms of fixing some of these payment systems that are broken, quite frankly. We've all had some nightmare stories to tell about things like cross-border payments, so we'll be looking forward to making that whole customer experience better. So fantastic work. Thank you so much for doing that.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me. This has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah, well, I know our audience is going to enjoy it, so thank you for that. And I'm going to encourage our audience to check out our many other Pause for Payments sessions that we run every week. And they're great learning opportunities for industry issues like today and career issues as well. So thanks everybody for listening.